Hey guys, welcome back to Fright Flicks. This is Mike, and we are doing Killer Theories for MTV Scream, Episode 6, Jeepers Creepers. Again, just putting this out there, we all know this by now, but all these episodes are based on horror movie titles. This one, of course, Jeepers Creepers. If you haven't seen it, my goodness, stop listening to this right now, go watch Jeepers Creepers. I actually have two movie recommendations for this week. The first one would be Jeepers Creepers. If you haven't seen it, definitely go watch it. If you've only seen it once and thought it was really silly, watch it again. It's actually pretty damn cool. And it was filmed around where I live here in Florida. I basically see those locations. I don't see them all the time, but they're very close to where I live. So give that movie another watch, possibly the second one too. And the other movie recommendation should be coming up here very shortly. It was written by Anna Christopher. She's written some episodes of MTV's Awkward, which is a show that I've never seen. I mean, I don't think I'm ever going to watch it, even if you guys tell me that it's good, just like Teen Wolf. But if it's really good and you really think that I should be watching it, like Teen Wolf, still not going to watch that though. Tell me, maybe I'll watch a few episodes. Anyway, she's written for some of those. And then this episode was directed by Evan Katz. Now, see, the thing about him is it's kind of hard to tell which Evan Katz this is. There's quite a few of them listed on IMDb, somebody who produces for 24 and different things here and there. What I like to believe, and I can't verify this just yet, what I like to believe is that it's a guy named E.L. Katz. He sometimes goes by Evan Katz, and I would like to believe it's him because he directed a movie that's a really cool movie called Cheap Thrills, and I don't know, because Ty West directed an episode, and Lee Janik, I believe is how you say her name. Anyway, I like to believe it's him. That was my second movie recommendation for this week. If you haven't seen it, check out Cheap Thrills. Very, very cool movie. And real quick, since we're on the subject of recommendations, there's another show that's on right now. I just don't have the time to be reviewing Killer Theories for two shows, but there's a show that's on Freeform. And Freeform, as best as I can understand, is what ABC Family used to be, but they changed their name anyway. It's a show called Dead of Summer. I'm watching that currently right now too, and based on what I'm hearing online, people aren't really liking it here, there, whatever. But I'm kind of digging it. I'm kind of liking it. It's about a summer camp in the 80s. Got Tony Todd in it. Supposedly it's a slasher. I haven't really seen too many slasher elements, but it's supernatural, really kind of more than anything. But I'm really liking the show. I think it's pretty cool, especially for something that used to be at least on ABC Family. So maybe check it out. Maybe we'll talk about that one too. I'll do little mini reviews or something on that one. But watch it. Let me know what you think. Okay, so getting right into this show, we start with Noah's podcast recap, where he's talking about one of the lines I really liked that he says is, when everybody's a suspect, there is no innocence, which I really liked, and of course it's cut to Audrey on the murder board as prime suspect. It's a good beginning. I like it, especially because it also starts with Brooke in front of the mirror, and I love Brooke, and Brooke was badass in this episode, so we'll get to that. Trust me, I'll spend some time on that shit. So anyway, it starts with Brooke, and she's pretending like she's going to cut her hair. I'm like, no, Brooke, don't cut your hair. And she doesn't. Instead, she goes buck fucking wild on her bed, stabbing it with scissors. I was like, oh my God, please let that be some foreshadowing. We're going to get some Brooke scissor action. And sure enough, these writers nowadays, they know what we want to see. So they were like, oh, you want to see some Brooke stabbing shit with scissors? How's about Brooke stabbing some people with scissors? Don't worry, bro, we got you. But again, we'll get to that in a little bit. And then also at that point, we get Audrey just punching the hell out of a punching bag. Audrey tough as hell. And she turns out she's really upset because she can't find her phone. That is, I guess, the reason she's punching her punching bag. But that comes back into play a little bit in a later scene. But overall, we all know what that says about Audrey. She ain't sneaking anything by us or Noah by that point. But we'll get to all that later on. So anyway, yeah, it's Brooke punching, Audrey punching shit, Brooke stabbing shit, trying to cut her hair off, and then it's hey, scream, boom, and we're into it. Alright, so it starts out Emma, of course. Emma kind of, if I have one complaint really about this episode, is that Emma kind of reverted to old Emma. New Emma wouldn't put up with half that the writers pulled on this one. New Emma would have been slapping bitches and breaking windows. But new Emma just basically reverted back to like, you don't trust me, Kieran, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go have sex with somebody else. Not that she did that, but I'm just saying. And so I was a little disappointed in that. But anyway, so the episode starts, Emma gets a call from the killer. And one thing I like specifically that the killer says is like, oh, poor, sad, awful Emma. It's like, he gets it. The fucking killer gets it. He's just like, Emma, please, why don't you just die already? You're so awful. But anyway, and then he starts saying a whole bunch of stuff. And this really seems like where the show wants us to go, to the point where I don't think anybody's really buying it. And it could be, I mean, I don't think so, because there was some stuff with Noah later on in this episode that I think, of course, disproves the whole thing. But anyway, he's like, you can't trust anybody, let alone yourself. And she's like, fuck you, I can trust myself, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I'm in your head, Emma, and you know it, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, who cares about all that? Like, we'll get to that, and it's basically the same old theory that it's Emma, and she's just going crazy, and PTSD, and blah, blah, blah. And we'll have to wait and see on all that kind of stuff, because like I said, there are just things that don't make sense about that. I was working on a whole theory earlier tonight after watching this episode twice. By the way, this time I watched it twice, made sure I watched it twice. But anyway, she's the whole like girl interrupted thing, and then it was boy interrupted, and that was when what's his name got killed, and she's the first person who shows up at the hotel when. So I was like, oh shit, is it Emma? Because in this episode, not really anybody sees the killer again. Nobody really dies again until the very end, and then I saw the very last scene, and I was like, oh shit, like we might really be into something here. But again, I'll get to all that. So anyway, same old theory that Emma's just seen the killer, the killer's not really after her, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so it cuts right down, and Kieran's talking to Daisy, which is, I believe, one of the first times we ever see those two interact, and it's just little things like that. It's like, I like to see those two interact, and there was, like, some cute little looks between them. I'm like, Kieran gonna try and get with your mom, Emma, you keep trying to get with Eli, he ain't gonna have none of that. You gonna get him, some Daisy. He could too, just by the way. Emma, you better watch yourself, because he could totally fuck your mom. Anyway, so then she's like, oh, Emma's asleep, she can't talk right now. Emma comes down, and she just starts bitching at him about some stuff, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry I told everybody about the phone. I'm really sorry. She's like, well, why did you tell me you were sorry? And he's like, well, I've been calling all morning. So, I hate to point this out, but this is true, that evidently Kieran's been calling her all morning, and she keeps, like, not answering his calls, but she answered from the killer. So basically, it's like, ring, Kieran, nope, don't want to talk to him. Ring, Kieran, nope, still don't want to talk to him. Ring, unknown caller. Oh, God, here we go. Click, hello, Emma. Like, oh, you motherfucker, blah, blah. So, Emma doesn't take calls from her boyfriend, but she takes calls from the killer. Pure, old-fashioned Emma. Bring new Emma back. We got her for a little bit last episode. Come on, bring her back. This is bullshit. So anyway, then old Emma goes and visits Noah and starts acting like old Emma again. Anyway, so she sees that Audrey's the prime suspect on his murder board. He doesn't tell her about stealing Audrey's phone, which is good, because he doesn't have any allegiance really to Emma. Like, Emma can kiss his ass considering how he feels about Audrey, which is awesome. And we'll get into that again a bit later. But anyway, she's like, you shouldn't think that it's Audrey. It's not Audrey. How the fuck? Whatever. Emma. I swear, Emma doesn't ever help the plot. She just gets in the way of all these plots. I was like, but anyway, she's like, no, it is not Audrey, and you need to, like, my hand is all moving and stuff right now. It is not Audrey, and you need to take her picture down. And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem, blah, blah, and picks up the phone after she's gone, and it's like, oh, we see the gif, and it totally is her, and Emma's just ruining shit again. And so old Emma basically walks away from that situation, goes to a new situation, which is basically telling Brooke that she needs to stop being proactive. Brooke's like, oh my God, I totally think it's Seth. And Emma's like, don't follow up on that. Don't do anything about it. Just cry about it. Tell a whole bunch of people that they're not trusting you. And then, go cheat on your boyfriend. This is what people do, right? This is what people do in Lakewood when they have a serial killer after them. Brooke's like, no, I'm not having any of that. Brooke's like, it's Seth Branson, and I am going to go after him, basically. And there was one cool Emma line. Emma's like, don't go down the Branson spiral. I'm like, that's badass. So that needs to be a band name or something like that. So then Emma finally leaves, like, thank God. Leaves Brooke alone. Brooke starts overhearing her father, the mayor, talking to the sheriff. And the sheriff's like, so, what about Jake's phone? And the guy's like, oh, nothing, it's encrypted and blah, blah, blah. Goes right out to his car, starts looking through the text messages again. Ugh, not much really going on there, but hopefully it's being set up for something cool. Just fingers crossed it becomes something. So then we start getting into some of the stuff that makes this one of the best, if not the best, again, episode that this whole series has had, which it starts with Noah tracking down Audrey. And what's really cool in this one is, again, it's the whole killer stuff, that like he looks around the corner and Audrey's just there. Then he looks around another corner, she's gone, looks, and then pops out. That's stuff that I'm really enjoying the hell out of. Like Audrey, even without the costume on, like follows killer logic. How like killers can just sneak up on people and they're on them. But you know what I mean? It's like fucking cool. Oh, this is so cool. But anyway, she jumps out at him and she like punches him and he's like, oh, like that hurt. Why did you punch me so hard? And blah, blah, blah. And she's like, why are you following me? And he's like, oh, I was just trying to buy a bicycle or something, which is really funny. Like, I loved his whole like being aloof when he's around her, because he's whatever. This guy is really good. He can play anything. So he's playing aloof and hurt and scared. He's playing like 4 different emotions all at the same time. He's great. So he's like, oh, I want to buy a bike and you should help me look for a bike, blah, blah, blah. Look at the one with the chrome handlebars. And as he's got her like turned to the window, he like slips her cell phone back into her backpack. And I'm like, dude, like, you know she's a killer. Like, you know she's up to some shit. And you really just think that's going to work. But whatever, it's Noah, so Noah gets a pass on everything. So I'm fine with that. So this all leads to some really good stuff later on in the episode. But it all started here by Curious and the Virgin. Just make a whole TV show about that, guys. Come on, get with it. So then Noah, we start following him around, basically. And guess where he goes? Ugh. He goes over to Emma's. Which, I mean, truthfully, if this was like a show about Noah and his whole thing that he's doing, or even Audrey, and Emma tied into it like that, I'd still be fine with her, because Emma's alright when she's around one of the two of them. Problem is we follow around her, and she goes and talks to people we have no care about at all. Which brings me to just a little thing. I mean, of course, I noticed it. You all noticed it too. That there was no Eli in this episode, and there was no Zoe in this episode. So does that mean that they're off any kind of killer theory list? Oh, hell no. Because, you know somebody who wasn't in many episodes last season? Piper. So, yeah. That's one of those things where it's like, oh, it could be this person because they were here at this point, and this person because they were here at this point, and they weren't there. Yeah, but there was no Eli and no Zoe. So the whole episode, they could have been wearing Scream masks and like hiding behind bushes the entire time, and we'll just find that out later. Anyway, just wanted to point that out. Not that that went by anybody, but still, they weren't in this episode. So anyway, back to the plot. Noah goes over to Emma's. He's like, hey, we should text this guy Eddie. Who's Eddie? Eddie Kruger. He's like, because he said that he saw Piper's accomplice, and so if we send him a text of Audrey, you know, he's playing Emma in the opposite. He's like, if we go and show him a picture of Audrey, then it'll do what you want it to do, Emma, which is go against the plot and get anything fucking done. So he has to like trick her. He's like, then he'll say, oh no, it's not her, and then we'll be fine. Meaning that Noah really wants it to like send the picture and be like, oh my god, that's her, and blah blah blah, and then he'll have Emma on his side. See, you got to be smart to get past Emma. Emma's just trying to ruin everything all the time, unless she's the killer, in which case it makes sense. But anyway, so he's doing this whole thing, and he sends it to her. He's like, hey, you recognize this chick, sends a message. And then again, this guy's just, Noah's fucking awesome. So he sends it, and he's like, all right, so the ball's kind of in his court. We have to wait for bloop, bloop, bloop. He's like, oh, wow, there he is. And he looks, and he's like, wow. Okay, wow. Yeah, no, that's not very useful. But at least we get the 3 dots, so we're waiting for some. And then it cuts to, like, dead. Ooh, you don't get, other than Jake, you don't get much deader than this. It cuts to Eddie, and he has this, he's wearing his name tag that says Eddie. It's like, oh, God, whatever. Okay, still, that's fine. Okay, because he's not wearing his glasses. So anyway, he's dead as shit in some shower. So anyway, Killer's standing over him and is like, meet me at the fun house, throws his cell phone onto his dead body. Even Scream, probably act ends. So then it cuts to something that I really, really, totally could not care one less bit about. It's like, I can't even stand the mayor when he's talking to Brooke, and she's one of my favorite characters. I can barely stand him when he's talking to the sheriff, and I know that it's setting something cool up. Fingers crossed, I hope. But boy, if there was one fucking character that you could set the mayor up with that I could care even less about, it would be Eli's mom. Like, it's worse than Eli. If it was like the the mayor was having conversations with Eli, I'd be like rolling my eyes and be like, ugh, what a waste of time. But it's not even Eli, it's Eli's old trashy mother, like, ugh, nasty old woman. Anyway, so they meet up and they're having drinks just like old nasty people do. Ugh. Anyway, so let's just skip by that part. This is what's cool. So it's Brooke and Stavo. They start having like their whole little thing, and that starts getting a little bit more developed in this episode. So they're at the grindhouse. And this is just one thing I like, is that Stavo like comes up behind her, and she's like, oh my god, wear a bell if you're going to creep like that. Jeepers creepers. But anyway, I love that, because that's something I say to people all the time who sneak up on me. It's like, wear a fucking bell, man. So I really like that. And so she gets and she's like, hey, can you use that creeperness that you have and look through your dad's files on Seth Branson? He's like, yeah, baby, no problem. I ride a bike and I'm creepy, but yeah, I can do that, no problem. So anyway, cut to Kieran's talking to the sheriff or whatever. But before that, it basically starts on a picture of Clark Hudson, the old sheriff, Kieran's dad. And it shows that Kieran's just steady, he's just staring at it. And I'm like, ooh, Kieran, you're so fucking killer. I swear to God, there's your motivation right there. And if that wasn't enough motivation for him, he even gives you his motive later on. But whether I think Kieran's the actual killer, whatever, I'll get to that at the end. But anyway, he's looking at his dad's picture. They both walk off. Stavo comes out of the archives, is like all creepy, then goes and gets on his bike, I guess, and then rides off to wear Brandon James masks and take pictures, selfies of himself. Anyway, so he comes out. They go in, and Kieran's talking with the sheriff. And he says something. Okay, everybody else needs to go and look at what he says here, and let me know if you hear this any better. It's basically right at the end of an episode. That a sentence, and Kieran's like, sometimes they'd use my place to meet up for privacy. Now, I figure, and it could be just as simple as this, that he's talking about Jake and Brooke. Jake and Brooke used to meet up at his house to be able to hook up for privacy. I don't know. That's probably all it is, being that the sheriff's all over Jake right now. That could be all it is, but if you have other theories, and that theory could be anything, but still, just something. So anyway, that's besides the point, because this is what happens. And the sheriff's like, well, what about Emma? He's like, I already told you about the phone. I ain't telling you shit about Emma after that. And he comes around the side of the desk, and he's like, you should be a little bit more forthcoming. And Kieran's like, why? And he's like, because if you were more forthcoming last time, your dad would still be alive. I'm like, damn. I'm like, dude, you need to back the fuck up. You're dealing with Kieran here. You ain't dealing with Emma or Daisy or the stupid fat mayor. You're not dealing with any. Like, Kieran will smack you out them jeans. I swear to God. Like, you need to watch your ass. Especially because Kieran's the killer. He gonna smack you the fuck out them jeans, bro. But anyway, so I'm like, oh, damn. But evidently that sets into Kieran, because he brings it up later with Emma. So, fair enough. At least he's getting through to him a little bit. Okay, so then we move on, Stavo and Brooke, part 2. And Stavo tells Brooke, and we don't actually ever see the files. Remember, keep that in mind. But he tells her, he's like, oh, I went looking through a whole bunch of stuff, and I found out that Branson is dating Miss Lang. Ding, ding, ding. Okay, so Miss Lang was the big thing last week, and I'm just going to go ahead and make a whole side thing here, is that it would probably be smart of me to say that it's Mrs. Lang, because that's what everybody's going to say. That was the big one last week, and no doubt it's going to be the huge, huge one this week. Basically, I'm going to come across as an idiot if I say that I don't think that it's Miss Lang. Okay, so here's the thing. This is the only reason I don't think it's Miss Lang. And I have a bunch of reasons why I do think it is, but here's some of the reasons that I don't. Okay, because pretty much I'm just going on the idea that, okay, so it ends up being Mrs. Lang. Not only is she just like Piper, she looks just like fucking Piper. Which, here's a little thing, is that Brooke, jeez, poor Brooke, don't mean to lump her in with these girls. So Piper looks just like Miss Lang. Miss Lang looks just like Haley. All three of these people look like they could be sisters. Plus, they all have that hair and the whatever that Eddie was talking about. But whatever. He could have just been talking about Piper. So, because if you go back to that episode, he's like, oh, the chick who wore the glasses and had the anime hair or whatever he says. And Noah's the one who says, yeah, Piper, let's move on. He never actually says Piper himself. But anyway, so this is the thing about Miss Lang. She was big last week. She's going to be big this week. The thing about her is that somebody who follows us, and I'm sorry I can't remember your name right now, they pointed out to me, it was a big thing that I was saying last season, how I figured out that Piper was a killer. One of the killers, but still. Anyway, it was that I just have this feeling that MTV is a little too scared to touch on teen violence. So I was like, okay, so with that in mind, and that's a tricky thing to deal with, fair enough, they're only playing towards teens, so they have some responsibility to that kind of thing. Although guns to school isn't a big deal to them. But anyway, so teen-on-teen violence. So I was like, it's probably going to be an adult because they don't want to go there. Glorifying the killer, which is kind of what these things do, is a little bit too much when they know that they're playing to teenagers. So last season I said that. I ended up being right. Somebody brought that up to me. But again, she looks too much like Piper. She totally fits into the Piper thing. Like, if you were to, no one would want to watch the fucking show anymore if it was her. Right? Huh? Am I wrong? That it was like, oh, the killer last year was some brunette 35-year-old chick, and then, oh my god, crazy. This season was some brunette crazy, 35-year-old chick. I'm just not buying it. But here's the thing about her. She has a whole bunch of stuff that's pointing to her. She was with Branson. She's one of the few people who could know that Branson was in that hotel room. Yada, 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 yada. Plus, there was that whole creepy look she gave the last episode, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that points to her. This is one of the big things that I think points to her, is that they even bothered to bring it back up last time. As I think I even mentioned it in my final killer theories for last season, where I was really into Branson, and I'm still really big into Branson. I don't trust that motherfucker at all. But anyway, I was like, I think it could be Branson, because I think who Piper could be, other than being, Emma's sister, Daisy's daughter, is that they could have that one chick who Branson was dating wherever he was. It's like, okay, that chick supposedly killed herself. They could have used her and then used her to steal her identity or something like that. So anyway, he tells us that her name is Catherine. We already learned that. Sheriff figured that out episode before the last one, or the last episode of last season. So anyway, that's why I think Miss Lang could be connected, because I'm still waiting for that chick to pop back up, or somebody who stole her identity type of stuff. But anyway, that's just something to think about. But past that, no, I don't really think it's Miss Lang, just because how boring would that be? But that doesn't mean that if you pick Miss Lang for this episode that you're by any means wrong. Like I said, I kind of feel like an idiot for not picking her, but I'm just not going to be the one who does that. Not going to do it. But anyway, back to the plot of the episode. So Stavo's like, oh, she's dating Miss Lang, and then I love Brooke. Brooke's so fucking good in this episode. She's really gotten really good. She's like, the chick with the blazers? And he was like, yeah, I know it's weird, huh? She's actually his age. I'm like, damn, Stavo. Good one. And Brooke doesn't even hear that. She's just like, blazer babe. She's all obsessed about these blazers, but that's why I love Brooke. She's fucking adorable, and she's awesome. Oh, she's a badass now, too. Oh, my God, Brooke's the best character ever. Way better than Emma. Fuck you, Emma. Anyway, and Stavo's like, all right, just promise me one thing. And she's like, yeah, that I won't get involved, blah, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, no, take no prisoners and kick as much ass as needed. I'm like, yeah, get some, Stavo. Okay, then we get a little scene. Audrey tries to go get a new phone, blah, blah, blah. She finds her old phone. Gee, who could have put that in there? All right, and then we cut to who's the one who put that in there. It's Noah, and Noah's still hanging out with Emma. Poor Noah. It's like he's getting tracked by a killer. His best friend's onto him for thinking he's a killer, and he has to hang out with Emma. What could be worse? Oh, Natch, boom, cue Daisy to come in and be like, no, Emma, you can't go somewhere. She's like, no, Mom, you need to start trusting me. Poor Noah has to sit through all this, but we did too, so sorry, Noah, about time. So anyway, Noah tells us a little bit of important information at the very beginning of the scene. He's like, Emma's like, why we gotta go to the front house? And he's like, oh, well, because Eddie moonlights there as a guard, which Eddie's not a very good guard, because he walked right into somebody's house filled with plastic and walked into the bathroom and got himself murdered by a corkscrew. So if that's the kind of guard they're hiring at this funhouse, no shit, he got killed. But anyway, that's besides the point. So anyway, they're talking about everything. Daisy comes home. He's like, hey, Daisy, you should be on the morgue. And she's like, ha, 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 that would be so much fun. Why hasn't he had her on the morgue? I don't know. I mean, she's totally connected to everything, but I guess maybe that'll be a plot thing, because Daisy's the killer overall. You heard it here. Anyway, so, not this season, but overall. So she's like, no, we don't know what happened to Jake. You're not going anywhere, Emma. Boom, shuts that shit down. And we get to that a little bit later. But before that, we get a nice little scene between Audrey and Stavo, where Stavo's like, here, look at my cool art and stuff like that. And she's like, no, I don't want to. And he was like, you owe me, bitch. And it's all like broken and cracked. And that whoever draws this art, again, this guy's a really good artist. I like it. And so anyway, he's making a graphic novel about Lakewood and Lakewood 6. Sketchy. But anyway, he says something pretty good. He's like, oh, even murder can be art. And Audrey's like, that's a good line right there. And anyway, basically the scene is just like, I suspect you, you suspect me, and, let's be happy together. And then we move on to what is possibly my favorite scene in this episode, but no, not at all. There's another scene that is my favorite scene in this entire series, so this one unfortunately comes in second. But anyway, it's Brooke, and she's sitting there, and she's like, I'm gonna get this Ms. Lang, bitch. And so she's sitting there, and I just love Brooke in this episode. She's so good, she really is. Where she's just sitting there, and she's like bored out in front of the movie theater, and all of a sudden she looks to like her left, and she starts just like fake crying. And then you see Miss Lang coming up. I just thought that was so cute. And then if Miss Lang didn't need more, shade thrown on her, like they have their whole scene and the theater marquee behind them is Something Wicked This Way Comes. It's like, oh my God. Like, okay, again, I'd be an idiot to not pick Miss Lang this episode, but I really just think the writers have, like, they're too smart to, like, make a clue that obvious. You know what I mean? But then again, if this is going to be a 12-episode season, we are halfway through, so... but anyway, so it says Something Wicked This Way Come, and this is great. This is what... Brooke is so smart. Brooke is like, she's like, okay, so you're good at psychology and everything. She's like, yeah, sweetheart, I'm good at it. And she's like, well, I was with Mr. Branson. Stone face. She's like, yeah, I was with your boyfriend. She doesn't say that. She's like, yeah, I was with Mr. Branson, and we were butt fucking the other night, and blah, 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 and Jake died. Ooh, and you can just see Miss Lang's like, fuck that bitch-ass bitch. She doesn't say anything. She goes and she gets right on the phone. She's like, Branson, you tell me that you're off the fucking students again. But she only gets Branson's voice message because Branson at that moment is talking to Brooke, and Brooke's all like, oh my God, I want to have sex with you because I'm sad about Jake. And this guy doesn't even think nothing of it. He's just like, okay, that totally makes sense to me. I'll come over and let you handcuff me up, and so he's like, okay, I'll see you later, bye. Click, boom. And sorry, I believe it too. It's like, make sure you wear the he sounds just like the killer too, by the way, but it's like, make sure you wear that cheerleading outfit, and I'll see you at 8 o'clock or right later. Like, bring the handcuffs, and the iron for some reason. Bring handcuffs, a knife, and an iron. Anyway, leave the scissors this time. But anyway, I can't blame the dude, especially with that cheerleader outfit. I'm sorry, just have to bring that up again. Okay, then we cut to a really crap scene, but I have to mention it because there's stuff to be mentioned in here. Okay, so it's the mayor and Eli's mom. My God, if nobody cared about either one of these characters, let's throw them together. That'll make people care. Like, my God. So anyway, she's over there, and they're all, like, pretending like they're going to hook up, and they're all drink. Anyway, and so, like, I'm like, Mayor, don't do it. Like, you're better than that. Like, this nasty, with psycho son, and But anyway, so he's like, he doesn't. He's like, nope, we ain't having none of that. You got the wrong impression. He's like, I looked at you, and I didn't see some girl who was worth getting with. I saw a chick that looks desperate. I'm like, you damn right, she looks desperate. Anyway, so he's like, I got something I want to hire you for. Cutting off somebody's hand? I don't know. Maybe. I doubt it, but maybe. You never know. She looks like somebody who cut off somebody's hand and then iron it back on. But anyway, we'll see about all that. Okay, so then basically right automatically after all that, like, Emma tries to leave the house and her tires pop. Now, I don't know if this is some kind of killer thing or whatever, but I just imagine her tire pops and she looked back up to the house and, like, Daisy's just standing there, with her cup of coffee and, like, she's never dressed. Anyway, so she's sitting there and she's just like, told you we ain't going nowhere, bitch, I popped your tire. Which one thing about this is, just a little side note, is that they don't do the whole, like, pop-up music thing anymore. I remember we were complaining about that not too long ago. Remember they would play like some crap-ass song and like it would pop up to let you know what that song was, and it was distracting and everybody hated it. Yeah, they don't do that anymore, so good for them. Maybe they are actually listening to what fans have to say about stuff. But anyway, then we move on to Noah at the Funhouse. Now, I don't really need to talk about this because this was a clip that we all saw beforehand, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. So, anyway, I really like this scene because this was awesome, and more Noah is always a good thing. But this was a really funny scene and a great fucking location, like awesome location. There was a ton of clowns. I don't like clowns. I'll let you into that. Might be telling too much about myself. I don't like clowns. I don't like carnivals for that reason either. But abandoned ones are pretty cool. And so, yeah, it's like Noah, blah, blah, blah. We all saw it. We all saw it twice probably. So he goes in the Hall of Mirrors. Again, awesome. It always makes me wonder how they film that kind of stuff, but maybe just a black sheet. Anyway, so he goes in there and just has this awesome moment where he's just like, stops and he's like, nope, 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 nope. So he goes back onto his car, he gets kidnapped, and here's a big thing. So, Audrey, and I'll just jump ahead just a tiny bit. At the end, Audrey's like, blah, 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 and I told Piper to come to town, but that was basically all I had to do with it, and I didn't know she was killing people, and we were going to make a documentary, and blah, blah, blah. But this scene very obviously showed that Audrey still has a Brandon James costume. Although, it can be figured out that because Stavo also in this episode, I believe like the next scene, yeah, well no, it's a few scenes later, she's like, it shows him with the mask on and he's taking selfies and blah, blah, blah. Covered in tattoos, by the way. This kid's like still in high school. What is he doing with all these tattoos? But anyway, sheriff's sons are the worst. So like, Audrey still has a Brandon James costume. Now, she's saying that she wasn't, like, really, truly an accomplice, and she hasn't said it yet, neither has the show, who was the one who dragged Will away and all this stuff. But she's basically trying to say that she wasn't. Noah's not having any of that. Noah's smarter than that. We're all smarter than that. So, we don't exactly still know what her role is, but this part kind of gave her away in the way that she still has a Brandon James costume. So, I don't think you have one of those if you're just like writing letters to bitches and not doing much else. So anyway, Noah gets kidnapped and we were all like, if you kill Noah, I'm stopping watching this show. So thank God, spoiler alert, they didn't kill Noah. But anyway, so then it gets into a really awesome part, which is Brooke and Branson. This brings up just one small thing. I know the dad mentioned it at one point, the mayor, but whatever happened to Brooke's mom? Like, I keep anticipating her being a bigger thing, but they kind of just don't mention her anymore. I'm thinking season 3, when it kind of gets back on track with all this Brandon James stuff, that she'll come up, because she's just the right age to be the whole Daisy triumvirate with the sheriff, so hopefully we see more of her. Anyway, so Branson comes over, she handcuffs him up. You ain't handcuffing me, Brooke, I'll tell you that much. You're cute, but you ain't handcuffing me, you crazy bitch. But anyway, and then she pulls out the scissors, and it's kind of awesome, kind of like, she sells it, where she's like, playtime's over, bitch. And she's like threatening to cut his, dick and balls off, and it's like, but she gets raw. She doesn't do that, but, she starts like punching him in the face and cutting him in the face and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, good for you, Brooke, get it. Branson says he was like, no, I was going to see Jake that night, but he was paying me money to leave town. He was going to pay him like $10,000. Like I said, he finally brings the whole Caitlyn thing up again, and so she's like, all right, you better admit, or I'm going to cut off your dick and balls. Like, admit. And he doesn't admit, and so that's enough for Brooke, so she just leaves him, like, tied up, which, again, she's sketchy about it. She's like, enjoy your stay. And then the killer comes in later, like, cuts off his hand and soldering irons it back. But anyway, we'll get to all that later on. Yeah, we'll get back to all that later on. But basically, like, Brooke's turning into a badass, and this is the kind of stuff I really like to see. So then we cut from that to Kieran changing Emma's tire. Wah, wah, wah. If there wasn't a more boring fucking action to have to watch somebody do, poor Kieran. He's regulated to literally just being, like, her, like, go-to person. However, somebody must have, maybe not, maybe it is just a plot point, that somebody popped her tire. But I could totally see that it was Kieran. And from what I've been saying, we can go into this a little bit more, see if it plays out. But, like, the killer doesn't seem to be after her. He could have jumped out at her at the motel. He could have killed her a whole bunch of times. The killer doesn't seem like the killer actually wants to kill Emma this time. Just, like, play around with her and keep her in the loop. Now, Kieran pops her tire. Would he bother to change it? Yada, yada, yada. Who knows? But anyway, so he's regulated to having to change Emma's tire, basically, this episode. But he does, interesting enough in this scene, he brings up the whole thing where he's like, if you would have been more open with me, my dad would still be alive. Bing! There, I think, is his motive. But anyway, we'll get to that. before all that becomes anything, it cuts to Stavo. He's wearing the mask, taking all of his pictures, to put on his Facebook, like Brandon James Facebook, whatever it is that he fucking does with these pictures. So anyway, Brooke comes over. I thought they were going to like hook up or whatever. They don't. That scene kind of goes nowhere other than like, hey, look at Stavo. He's crazier than we thought he was. And then we get into the best scene that has ever been on MTV Scream before. Okay, yeah, but best scene ever, so it cuts, and Noah and, well, I guess they don't reveal that it's Audrey, but whatever, we've all seen the episode, so it turns out that Noah and Audrey are locked up inside this carnival. Very cool. And, like, Noah looks back, Audrey's got the bag over her head, she pulls it off, she's like, I don't know what happened, I was in the back alley of Grindhouse, and somebody snuck up on me. And he's like, oh God, we're in a torture porn, and nobody ever survives this, let alone, like, if one person does, and then two, which, boom, 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 I think might be our answer to the mystery of this episode. Think about it. So he talks quite a bit about torture porn. There's this really funny part where he's like, oh, I see some tools. They're just out of reach. He's like, oh, that's what he wants. It's part of his torture fetish. But anyway, side note of a side note. So somebody pointed out last episode that he was going through her phone and he was trying all these different passwords, which I really liked. And a whole bunch of people were like, oh, it says this, blah, blah, blah. And then somebody, and again, I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, but figured out, and I can't verify this, but supposedly it's true, that her password to her phone is Foster's Girl, which I think is amazing, and that's just fucking awesome. But anyway, that's a little side note. And so the other side note, which whatever, I'll get to that in a second, but he's basically like, oh God, we're both gonna die, so I need to tell you the truth, I suspect you, blah, blah, blah. And there's really funny stuff, like he's like, oh God, I'm gonna die tied up in an Eli Roth movie, and this whole thing feels so Saw too, and then he says it, bum, 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 please don't make me cut off a body part. I didn't forget to talk right there, that's dramatic pause. Please don't make me cut off a body part. Another dramatic pause. So, something makes me think, just because I'm always for Branson for killer, always, that, okay, Branson's working with somebody, could be Miss Lang, could very well be Miss Lang, and it could be the whole thing that I said last season, which is that they faked that one chick's death, and now they're working together, and blah, 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 and I thought that was Piper, stole her identity, so very well could be Miss Lang. But I think that possibly Branson is working with her. And it was like either to get him out of the handcuffs, and this is jumping really far ahead, but whatever, to get him out of the handcuffs, she had to cut his hand off. Just like they were talking here. They set it up, they knocked it down. One mystery per episode, one answer per episode. Now, the other thing that it obviously could be is keeping him alive, kind of, for some reason, who knows, who cares. But she cut off his hand, so if we start seeing like his fingerprints start showing up on stuff, but again, isn't that a really smart ploy? Is they can cut off his fingerprints, start showing up on everything. Everyone's like, oh my God, it is Branson, blah, blah, blah. And then they find his hand and they're like, oh, it's not Branson because here's his hand. And it totally is Branson. So like we get a one, I know what you did last summer. Bing, bing, bing. That killer had a hook. And at the end of that, I'm not going to spoil that movie, but I'm sure you guys have seen it anyway. So they gave us, again, one of our answers in the title of the very first episode, that our killer was going to get their hand cut off and now have to start using a hook. But anyway, Branson's not working alone. It could be Miss Lang, but I don't think, because how Branson ended up, that means that Branson's out of it. I do kind of think that Branson is totally in on it. So, let me know what you think. Let me know if I'm wrong. But anyway, seems like it was pretty well set up. So, anyway, back to the plot. So, they're locked up in the place, blah, blah, blah. Emma arrives. Ugh, God. And I'm just like, please kill Emma. Please kill Emma. Oh, my God, please kill Emma. Just doesn't. So, she walks up to this abandoned place after Kieran told her not to. After her mom told her not to. She doesn't fucking listen to anybody. So she goes to this abandoned place. She sees Noah's abandoned car. She still keeps looking around. Killer's watching her from afar. Like, like this girl doesn't learn. Like, not only is she unbearable most of the time, that's old Emma, not as opposed to new Emma, who's awesome. No, this is still old Emma, and she hasn't learned a fucking thing, and she just walks into danger. Like, she just needs to fucking die. Like, Kieran's not going to be around forever to keep saving her ass. unless Kieran's a killer. But anyway, I'm not saying that. I am saying that. Fuck that. Kieran is the killer. But anyway, so anyway, it goes back to Noah and Audrey, and it has the funniest fucking thing I've ever heard. And this is the greatest this show has been, where he's confessing basically everything, and we come in mid-thing. He's like, I don't like my cat. We've never gotten along. And she's just back there, like, pretending to be tied up, and she's like, oh, God. Well. And he's like, I told Riley I like Terminator. That's not my favorite movie. It's not even in the top 5. It's Psycho, but you don't tell a chick that on the first date. Just all these lines, so fucking funny. And then he's like, my favorite movie is Somewhere in Time, which makes sense. It's Christopher Reeve's movie based on a Richard Matheson short story, so that actually makes sense for Noah. Haven't seen that movie, so I can't recommend it, but anyway. And then the greatest, what makes this so great is not only is this all so funny, and it stays funny, but then he's like, and I enjoyed kissing you, and he's like, I love you, and I felt something, and Lakewood was lame, and it's just like, oh, this is like, I'm sorry, I can't think of another word. I'm like, this is so fucking sweet. And what's so funny is Audrey's back there. She's like, no, don't say it. She's like, I love you, and she's like, oh, and she's banging her head on the carnival equipment and stuff. Oh, I just love it. And then she's like, oh, breaking hearts. But anyway, so her password is Foster's girl. But anyway, what she says to him, and she's like, well, I love you, Noah, but I don't love you in that way. And I'm just like, oh, breaking my heart. Here, Scream, breaking my heart, making me laugh and breaking my heart. Like, this whole show should be by Curious and the Virgin. Like, I'm telling you. Like, and then Emma's got to come fuck everything up. Oh, God, fucking Emma. But anyway, one other little thing I liked about this is that Noah's like, here we are sitting here making our deathbed confessions. Now, this is just a little thing, and if you haven't seen it, go ahead and check it out. I'm sorry, I don't mean to, self-promote, but me and Nate, who used to do the Killer Theories with me, we made a short film called Deathbed Confessional. You can find that here on the channel. Really funny, I think. Definitely check it out. Watch till the end. It's 10 minutes long, but I think it's worth it. So if you listen to these and want to know what me and or him look like, and I don't know, it's funny. So definitely check it out. Deathbed Confession. So anyway, back to Scream. Emma walks up, she ruins everything. Audrey's like, holy shit. Audrey unties herself, she's like, I kidnapped us both and blah, 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 but the killer's going to come here and kill us, blah, blah, blah. And Noah's even like, well, this is all complicated. And she's like, yeah, okay, let's just go, but don't tell Emma about me. Let me tell her. And he just kind of like gives her this dumb look, and she's like, yep, good enough for me, and runs out. So anyway, Emma's alone again and sees the killer again. Nobody else sees the killer again. And just when everything starts to get sketchy as hell, Kieran shows up again. Now, this is one of the few things that makes me think that it's not Kieran. It's just because he shows up in such a sketchy manner. But at the same time, like, Kieran's always pretty much sketchy, so I'm going to let that one slide. So anyway, starting to wrap up here, Emma and Kieran alone. Kieran's like, I told you not to go. And she's like, I know you told me not to go, but you need to start trusting me. He's like, oh. He doesn't say anything. He just does what Kieran does in these situations when he's dealing with fucking Emma. He's just like, I know, baby. I'm sorry. I need to trust you, blah, blah, blah. And what he really should be saying is, it's like, I need to trust. It's like, I need to trust you. What the fuck? I told you not to go somewhere. You literally watched me drive away, got in your car, and did exactly what I told you not to. How am I supposed to be able to trust you with anything? But he doesn't say anything like that. He's just like, okay, sure, Emma, no problem, blah, blah, blah. And goes right to the sheriff and is like, Sheriff, we need to talk about Emma. Boom. And that's how his whole arc of this episode ends. But before that kind of happens, is it cuts to the sheriff. The sheriff's looking through all the files, including stuff he has on his own son. Lady comes in. She's like, we found out where Emma's dad was getting the emails from Riley. It came from Emma's IP address. Whatever. Who knows what that means? That's simple. That's like, it feeds into the whole Emma being crazy thing, of course, but at the same time, like, especially with how the show, I always joke about it, uses apps. Like, that's just somebody. It could be Daisy, it could be anybody. That it really doesn't mean anything. It's like anybody could have, like, tapped into her IP address and sent those, so blech, whatever. I'm not even going to worry about thinking about those. So then we get to the part which I already kind of covered, that Audrey goes in and starts talking to Noah, and she's like, I just want to tell you something. And of course, I'm hoping that she's going to be like, I love you too. And he's like, I love you too. And they start kissing, and they hook up. and then they basically are bi-curious in the or she's, I guess you could still technically say bi-curious if she's hooking up with him. But anyway, he's no longer the virgin, which sets him up to get killed. It just would have been awesome. Like, just put those two together. I just want to see this. Come on, let's do this. But we don't get that. What happens instead is she admits, quote unquote, to being Piper's accomplice, blah, blah, blah. But she's lying, and he knows it. And so he's recording the whole thing. And so we're set up for the next part. Bam, bam. Can't wait for next episode. And then the final thing, our little tag for this episode, is the killer and Branson. So the killer comes in, takes the mask off of Branson, gets an iron out. Didn't bring an iron with her, had to watch that twice. Brought the iron out that was in the hotel room, cuts off his hand. And here's the thing, go back and listen. I might be stretching this, but he's all like muffled. He's like, and what I think he's saying, go back and listen, let me know, is he's like, I swear to God, I didn't tell her anything. I swear to God, I didn't tell her anything. That's what it sounds like. It's like, I swear to God, I didn't tell her anything. I swear to God, I didn't tell her anything. So, anyway, it's whoever's working with Branson comes in and is like, you motherfucker. Like, look at you. You not only fell for Brooke's old tricks, but now how am I supposed to get you out of these handcuffs? I'm not just going to cut through the handcuff thing. I'm going to cut your damn hand off and get us out of here. The only thing that kind of sucks about that is, and this is only a small thing because the show's named Scream, that the killer cuts off his hand, all that, without actually muffling him. So whoever's in this fucking hotel just heard him scream bloody murder, but whatever. Yeah, just let me know what you think about that, and possibly it is just for the fingerprints, but it was set up earlier. So anyway, I think that brings us to the end. Everybody start putting your killer theories below, and I know you're all going to put Miss Lang, and that's fine. That's fine. I understand. I could probably say that too. I'm not necessarily going to stick with Kieran. I do still think that Kieran's pretty sketchy, but basically my killer theory for this episode is that Mr. Branson is a part of whatever duo it is, and had to get his hand cut off to basically get out of all of it and prove it, and blah, blah, blah. So that is my killer theory, that Mr. Branson is a part of it. Part of it with Kieran, possibly. I don't know. Part of it with Miss Lang, like everybody else is going to say, probably. So anyway, we'll discuss all that next week. And just one little thing that I wanted to bring up before we go is Noah's job. I guess he gets paid pretty well for his podcast, so he doesn't need to go to his job anymore. But anyway, just a location from the first season that I kind of miss now that it's gone. But anyway, yeah, so at least that's working out really well for Noah. And with that, I think that brings us to the end, and we're already about the length, if not longer, than the actual episode of the show. So I'm going to let you guys go, and I will be back next week to talk about episode 7. So, this is Mike, and I'll see you later on, guys. Bye.